Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, an almanac of garden history, literature, and small botanical joys. I'm Jennifer Ebeling, and today is June 10th. If you garden in a cold climate, you already know the particular cruelty of spring. It teases, it backtracks, and it offers you one gorgeous warm day and then takes it away like it never happened. Rebecca Harrington wrote about this with the kind of honesty most people are too polite to put in print. In Penelope, she wrote, "Springtime in Massachusetts is depressing for those who embrace a progressive view of history and experience. It does not gradually develop as spring is supposed to. Instead, the crocuses bloom and the grass grows, but the foliage is independent from the weather, which gets colder and colder and sadder until June, when one day it becomes brutishly hot without warning." It was fitting then that the first people who chose to settle there were mentally suspect. Mentally suspect. I mean, she's not wrong. And yet, here we are. Out in the garden, in June, finally, stubbornly, triumphantly. Here's today's garden history. It was on this day in 1858 that the Scottish botanist Robert Brown died in London. He was 84 years old. Years earlier, Robert Brown had spent 4 long years exploring Australia. The expedition sailed aboard the ship Investigator, commanded by Captain Matthew Flinders. Robert traveled thousands of miles, collecting plants European science had never seen before. Banksias with their tall candle-like flower spikes, bottlebrush burning red along the creeks, and grevilleas with their strange spider-shaped blooms. By the time Robert returned to England, he had described thousands of new species. But Robert Brown was not only a collector, he was intensely curious. Where collectors gathered things, Robert wanted to understand how they worked. And once he began using the microscope, his curiosity only deepened. In 1827, he placed a few grains of pollen in a drop of water on a glass slide. Pollen, the same golden dust that clings to bees and drifts through the summer air. What he expected to see was stillness. Instead, the tiny particles began to tremble. They quivered and jittered constantly in place. At first, Robert wondered if the water itself was moving, but the drop was perfectly still. Then he wondered if the pollen was alive, so he repeated the experiment with dust, powdered rock, and even soot. The particles still moved. What Robert had discovered was something astonishing, because water is never truly still. Even when it looks calm, its molecules are constantly moving, bouncing and colliding in every direction. Those invisible collisions push tiny particles around. Robert Brown had witnessed the restless motion of matter itself. Today, we call that motion Brownian motion in his honor. Nearly 80 years later, Albert Einstein would explain the physics behind it. But Robert Brown was the first person to see the evidence. All because he wondered what pollen might do in a drop of water. That same curiosity led Robert Brown to 2 more discoveries that changed botany forever. First, he identified the structure at the center of plant cells. He called it the nucleus, from the Latin word for a little nut. And second, he showed that flowering plants and conifers reproduce in fundamentally different ways, what botanists now call angiosperms and gymnosperms. And all of it began with a curious mind, a microscope, and a grain of pollen. Because sometimes the biggest discoveries in science start with something very small, a speck of pollen moving quietly in a drop of water. And it was on this day in 1770 that the English botanist George Caley was born in Craven, Yorkshire, the son of a horse dealer. As a young man in the stables, George came to botany through need, not books. He started with herbs for sick horses. He taught himself Latin to read botanical descriptions, and in 1795, he walked to London and introduced himself to Sir Joseph Banks, the most powerful naturalist in Britain. In turn, Banks sent him to Australia. And when George arrived in 1800, he settled in Parramatta, a rough colonial town west of Sydney. His pay was 15 shillings a week. He had a timber hut, a yard for specimens, and more plants than any European had yet tried to sort. He wrote to Banks, "I have, in a manner, been murdering my constitution, but still it has not made the least change in my mind, for I possess the same eagerness as usual." The work was immense. Eucalypts, Waratas, and Banksias, an entire flora that refused every category he knew. For years, George was alone in it. But then he met Daniel Muatin. Daniel was an Aboriginal man who knew the country around Parramatta the way George knew Latin, completely from the inside. Together they traveled. Daniel read the land. George read the plants. On some of the specimens that George sent home, he wrote 3 words beside the entry: "Got by Dan." Of Daniel, George wrote, "I can place that confidence in him, which I cannot in any other. I know this one would stand by me until I fell. His name is Muatin." For a man as guarded as George, that sentence cost something. When George sailed for England in 1810, he brought Daniel with him. But Banks sent Daniel back to Sydney, and George went on alone. Although George married late in life, his wife predeceased him, and they had no children. He accepted a post in St. Vincent, a small island in the Caribbean, where the climate broke his health, and he resigned and came home again. George died in Bayswater, London, on May 23, 1829. He was 58 years old, and in his will, he left £1,000 in trust for his servant Maria, the woman who had stayed beside him at the end. It was George who first recognized that eucalypts could hybridize decades before celebrated botanists insisted it was impossible. George was right, and they were wrong. But nobody said so while he lived. Today, the duck orchid genus still carries Robert Caley's name, Caleyana. The duck orchid is a wildflower native to Australia, whose bloom looks exactly like a duck in flight. A rounded body, spread wings, and a small head tipped back. It is virtually impossible to cultivate, and it refuses every garden that tries to hold it. In today's Unearthed Words, we hear passages from the work of the American biologist and naturalist Edward Osborne Wilson, born on this day, June 10th, in 1929. Edward spent his life studying the social lives of ants, the collapse of ecosystems, and the bond between human beings and the living world. Edward saw himself as the next link in Darwin's chain, the next person who fell in love with the living world and could not stop. In his book, Biophilia, Edward gave a name to something gardeners have long felt: the idea that our bond with nature is not a preference. It is part of our nature, woven in. Edward wrote, "To explore and affiliate with life is a deep and complicated process in mental development, to an extent still undervalued. Our existence depends on this propensity. Our spirit is woven from it." Edward spent his final decades counting what we were losing. In his book, The Diversity of Life, Edward wrote, "One planet, one experiment." Edward died in 2021 at the age of 92. And I have never been able to push past that line. One planet, one experiment. Every garden is part of the proof. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Garden Plot by Sarah Sartain. We're still inside Garden Stories and Fiction Week here on The Daily Gardener, where gardens become the setting for mystery, memory, love, and transformation. And in today's book, we lean into the love. The Garden Plot is the first novel in Sarah's English garden romance series. 4 books built around characters who design, build, and tend gardens. This one is set in a small English village. Sam Winterson is a young garden designer. She runs her own small business. She cares fiercely about the countryside, and she is barely keeping the lights on. So, when a wealthy teenager named Magda hires Sam to design her family's garden, Sam jumps at the chance. What Sam doesn't know is that Magda's father, Jonas, a corporate property developer home recovering from an illness, is quietly behind a development that would tear up the village that Sam loves. What follows is an enemies to lovers story about gardens and developers and a teenager hoping for a real family, alongside 2 people on opposite sides of a village fight, trying somehow to find common ground. Now about the author. Sarah Sartain lives in East Yorkshire in England. She spent years in public relations before turning to fiction, and when she sat down to write her first novel, she chose the place she knew best, the garden. That love came from her grandmother. Sarah has said, "My grandmother taught me everything I know about gardening." She has also said that she's affected by gardens just the way her grandmother was. You go out for just 5 minutes, and a couple of hours later, you're heading back inside, muddy, with broken nails. And any gardener listening knows exactly what she means. This is a feel-good summer read, a small-town romance with garden design, village politics, and a family slowly finding its way back to one another through the work of the soil. It's a perfect midweek pick for Fiction Week. And finally, here's something sweet to ignite the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day in 1952 in Katona, New York, that Frances Theodora Parsons died at the age of 90. Most people knew her by another name. She published her most beloved books as Mrs. William Starr Dana, her first husband's name, as was the custom for women writers of her day. William was a naval commander, 16 years older than Frances, and she loved him dearly. When William died in a flu epidemic in Paris in 1890, Frances wore black and withdrew from the world, the way Victorian widows were expected to do. And she might have stayed there, but her friend Marion Satterley had another idea. Marion simply asked Frances to take walks with her, not to heal her, not to fix anything, just to walk. And somewhere on those walks, through the New York countryside, the wildflowers began to do what wildflowers do. And they pulled her back into life. By 1893, Frances had written How to Know the Wildflowers, the first field guide to North American wildflowers ever published. It sold out in 5 days. Theodore Roosevelt loved it. Rudyard Kipling loved it. And gardeners and walkers and curious souls have been reaching for it ever since. Frances loved the book too. At a friend's home one June morning, she spotted 2 children primly parading on the asphalt drive with their governess, Anna and James Roosevelt, Eleanor's children. Fanny invited them up the mountain path to hunt for wildflowers. They were, she later recalled in her memoir, too appalled by the steep curves and the outcropping rocks to derive any pleasure from it. But Fanny was not discouraged. Some people, she understood, needed more time. Of the wild columbine, Aquilegia canadensis, she wrote this: "There is a daring loveliness which stamps it on the memories of even those who are not ordinarily minute observers." And she was right. The wild columbine is a native perennial with nodding red and yellow blooms, shaped like a cluster of tiny lanterns, each petal curved back into a long, hollow spur. It blooms in spring in dappled shade, at home in zones 3 through 9, and it self-seeds so generously that once you have one, you tend to have many. Hummingbirds find it irresistible, and once you've seen it, so will you. Frances went on to write 3 more books. Along the way, she lost a second husband to a trolley car accident in Mexico City, and a baby daughter at 2.5 years old. But she kept going. At 90 years old, the year before she died, she published her memoir. She called it Perchance Someday. I always think about Marion Satterley, who didn't try to save Frances from her grief. She just said, "Come outside. Come see what's here." And Frances came. As we close the show today, remember, it's the gardener's version of Miller time, and June is busting out all over. The roses and the peonies, the catmint and the baptisia, the allium and the salvia, the clematis and the delphinium. Every single one of them required a belief in June back in March, when there was absolutely no evidence these June bloomers would ever arrive. That's either great faith or exactly the kind of optimism Rebecca Harrington was gently mocking. Either way, June is here, and the flowers are hitting their marks. And it turns out there was reason for optimism all along. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.